Check me out. Yeah. Welcome to the Mile High Mentors podcast. I'm super excited to have you here. I'm very grateful to have you here, whether you're listening on Spreaker, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, or you're finding this somewhere else on the internet. I sincerely appreciate you. My name is Connor Doobie, and I am the host each and every episode of this podcast. Be sure to please leave us some feedback, some comments, like and share the podcast, and please do not forget to subscribe. And by the way, you can follow us on Instagram as well for behind-the-scenes content as we're producing the show. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by activeblogs.com. They are the go-to resource for all things B2B marketing. They have been producing custom written blogs and newsletters for companies with high dollar and complex sales for over 17 years, and just recently launched a LinkedIn social selling and personal brand program for leaders in those same industries. Be sure to go check them out at activeblogs.com. Secondly, huge announcement to make. We are currently looking for sponsors for this podcast so we can continue to expand our messaging and our activities and some of the stuff that we're working on. So if that's something you're interested in and you'd like a spot in the introduction of our podcast, be sure to reach out to us at milehighmentors@gmail.com. You can also give us a shout on social. You can come find me personally. That's Connor Doobie, ConnorDube. Today's guest was a blast and was especially fun when you get to drink a little bit of hard cider with your guest in a fancy mug that's actually intended for Moscow mules. Unfortunately, Judson, Moscow mules are a little complex to try and put together in the studio, but we ended up having some great ciders. But today's guest, Judson Sparks, a really genuine and ambitious entrepreneur, very good person to have on the show. It was great having him come in and tell his story from very humble beginnings for Judson to growing up in a very small town of only a couple thousand people. He was raised by his grandparents and was influenced by his own mentors to join the military, become a medic and first responder, and has worked in that field for a few years now. And now he has a 3-year-old business venture, which just founded in 2014 called Medic CE. He is the CEO and founder, which now 3 years down the road, that company is generating $10 million in reoccurring profits and is in a really incredible position of explosive growth moving forward. So I'm very excited to see where they're going. Very excited for you to hear his entire story and just massive value chunks that Judson gives out in this podcast. So be sure to listen in. Please welcome Judson to the Mile High Mentors podcast. I'm so stoked you're here. Appreciate finally getting together, the podcast. And get to hear your story, man. I'm very excited to have you in. And do you want to start? So let's kind of start from the very beginning, because you have quite a journey to where you are today, and you're still a really young dude, and you're doing some really cool stuff. And so, where are you from originally?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to admit that one. No, I'm from Missouri originally. I grew up about 100 miles or so south of St. Louis, so in the middle of nowhere. And then after high school, I went in the military. I was active duty in the Air Force.
For how many years? 4 years?
Yep, 4 years active duty. And I'm still actually in the reserves as an officer in an air medical evacuation squadron. So got out of active duty, became a firefighter paramedic and a flight paramedic, and went to graduate school. And 2012 came to good old Colorado, and 2014 started my own company. So
yeah, what brought you out to Colorado?
After graduate school, I had a job with a company that's headquartered here, and I was over customer relations for 26 states. So it was in the air medical operations, so like here in Denver, Air Life of Denver. But
you were a medic before that, weren't you?
Yep. I actually worked on the helicopter as a flight paramedic. Yep. So came out here to do that job, and it was funny because I moved west to cover the east. So everything from St. Louis east is, I was always going east. And then 2014 January, I was in Miami Beach for a work conference. Yeah. And I told my boss at the time, man, I'm going to start this company, and he thought I was crazy because of everything I have going on. And spent all summer developing content and learning about technology as much as I could, and launched in September of 2014 and had 12 students the first month, and now we have 186,000 students.
That's incredible.
So, yeah,
that's amazing, man.
It's been a ride.
Yeah,
for sure.
So you're not going to get off that easy, though. You have to go back.
Okay.
Give me a little bit of context. What was growing up like? What were you? What was your kind of story from young kid to like your early 20s? Okay. Walk us through that a little slower. Okay. Because that's the good stuff.
Yeah, so very interesting story. My grandparents raised me. I actually grew up on a farm. Our hometown was about 2,500 folks.
So small town.
Very small town.
Yeah.
Yep. Grew up about 15 miles outside of that town on a farm.
Yeah.
So that whole story, it's funny because you hear it, I'm sure your family has joked with you, I walked 3 miles to the... I actually did walk. I literally did walk, or had to be taken 3 miles to catch the school bus. Wow. Yeah, my grandparents passed away. My grandma when I was 9, my grandfather when I was 15, went in foster care.
Wow.
And I actually got into the whole fire and EMS realm with the volunteer fire department in my hometown when I was 12 as a junior firefighter, and got...
what does a junior firefighter do?
You just start learning about team building, working as a team. You start learning different things about the fire service, ropes and knots, CPR, all that type of stuff. And when I was 16, I took a first responder class, which is pretty much like a basic first aid. I could give CPR, do a couple extra things that the layperson and the public wouldn't know about. And got my first job actually in this industry when I was 16 as a dispatcher.
In your hometown?
In my hometown. Yep, for the police department.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that was...
At 16?
16 years old.
How do you even get away with that?
Yeah, I was literally answering the phone when people were calling when they needed the police. So,
right.
Yeah.
What were some of the most interesting calls that you got in a small town that?
Yeah, there wasn't much going on. Oh my gosh, it was so long ago. The craziest one I can remember is someone trying to break into this lady's house when she was home alone, but it was actually ended up being a joke. So it was her husband's friends who were trying to play a prank on her, and I remember the police responding, and they had said shots were fired, but it was the guy shooting paintballs at their house.
Wow.
Yeah. So
he could have been shot himself.
Could have been. Yeah. I did CPR on a person when I was 16, like 2 days after I finished first responder.
Wait, how do you go from dispatch to giving...
So being a volunteer, a junior firefighter, you got to go out on calls.
Oh, okay.
So, in a small town, whoever shows up is who goes.
Right.
So I did that from 12 until I was 17. Got a lot of crazy experience, and then it was like, all right, now what I do? I'm done with high school. I was a A/B student, nothing special, was kind of quiet, a lot different than I am today. Everyone would tell you, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to go in the military. And they wanted me to be a telecommunications specialist or something, and I'm like, no, if I can't be a firefighter, I don't want to do it. And 2 months later, they called me back, and I left in December. And
what year is this?
98. Okay, 1998, and went to basic training in San Antonio, Texas, and then on to Goodfellow Air Force Base to the Department of Defense Fire Academy, And then I'd never been out of Missouri my entire life. So Texas was a huge eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah.
And then they sent me to Cocoa Beach, Florida. So it was there.
It's like a whole nother
dimension
over there compared to Texas.
Oh, yeah. Totally different. And as sad as this is to admit, it's the first time I ever saw the ocean. So I was 17. Everyone would swear I looked like I was 12. 140 pounds soaking wet. And I'm like, all right, and I'm in this state all by myself.
Yeah.
But
and you're stationed there then?
Yep. I was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I had a special duty assignment, and I was part of the 45th Space Wing Space Shuttle Support Team. So every time when the space shuttles were still flying, my job was to support the shuttle launch as a firefighter, and we learned how to egress the folks from the spacecraft on the launch pad and those types of fires, because the fuel they use to launch to launch a rocket, obviously, is different than your normal type of firefighting. So I did that, and I guess it was 2002 or so. I left active duty in the Air Force and got my first civilian job as a firefighter paramedic at 21 years old.
Wow.
So
just kind of back overview, like what really influenced you to get into this type of
good question.
I don't know, industry or just helping. I mean, helping people. Like, what influenced you to be so involved in this world?
So I guess kind of one part I left out. My aunt was a paramedic.
Okay.
And I every weekend would always go to my aunt's house, and my cousin and I were really close. So she would, sometimes have meetings, and she would go and she'd take us to the ambulance station, and just kind of thought it was cool, I guess. And my grandfather always was the type of guy who would help people, when he could before he got sick. So he wasn't in healthcare. He actually was a miner. That's pretty much what he did his whole career. But he always instilled upon me that if there's something I can do to help someone, even if it's not financially, there's other ways of helping people. So I just kind of took that and ran with it, I guess, and really instilled upon me the will and the want to really give back to people that helped me. So I had a huge support system growing up. Not so much with a family. My grandparents raised me and they passed away, but folks that were from the fire department, my hometown, that my grandfather knew his whole life. Matter of fact, the fire chief at the time, who was an older gentleman, he would go on my grandfather's farm back when he was a kid and ride go-karts. So it was just like one big family, small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Right.
So when he passed away, even though I went into foster care, everyone still kind of took care of me. So I just...
You had a community.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. So
it takes a village, right?
And that it did with me, that's for sure. So, that was... And then my aunt became a flight nurse and a flight paramedic, so...
What? So in the Air Force?
No,
or?
She... so in the civilian world...
Yeah.
It's like a helicopter that will go and land at an accident scene.
Oh, I see.
Or at a hospital and transfer a patient.
Gotcha.
So she started doing that and just kind of...
How do you deal with the blood, man?
You know what? That stuff does not bother me. I've seen a lot of crazy things. I've seen patients burnt up in cars. People upside down. I remember one call where I had to crawl across a 16-year-old to get to his friend. He was dead. And the friend ended up passing away because we couldn't get him out of the car because his friend was hanging upside down in the way.
Yeah.
I could tell you stories. It'd take 10 years to tell you all those, but that stuff never bothered me. What bothered me was when the patient would poop on themselves.
Oh, no.
The smell was that was really the only thing that got to me. But you see so much craziness.
Yeah.
And
you become kind of numb to it after a while.
Yeah.
Or you just always haven't had like too much of an issue with gore. Like didn't really.
Yeah, it never really bothered me.
Yeah.
But you also have a support network with the people you work with. They understand it, so you would talk about it. Because some of that stuff would get to, depending on the type of call. If you had kids at home, which I never did,
right,
and we went on a call that affected a child, the other guys or girls I worked with had kids at home, so they could relate to that. I related to older people because my grandparents raised me. So, we just talked about it. Of course, if you try to talk to anyone outside of this realm, they have no idea what the hell you're talking about. So you just kind of kept it to yourself, or you talk to other people. But it's actually today, because of all the craziness happening in the world, it's a much bigger issue with mental health. Yeah. Matter of fact, in fire and EMS, suicide is one of the highest. Has one of the highest rates of any other profession in the country.
I would imagine.
So yeah,
it's like counselors or have one of the highest suicide rates.
Yeah. It's like
I would imagine.
Yeah,
who could deal with what normal human could
exactly
really process that very well.
Yep.
I know I can't.
Yep.
I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
I get messed up over stuff that's not even real sometimes.
That's funny. No, it
freaks me out.
Yeah, just deal with it and
know
when you need to raise your hand and ask for help.
Yeah.
So it's it's definitely been interesting. So 20 years professionally I've been doing this, and if I counted all those years that I was still a kid, if you will, teenager, 26 years. So
but you're not now actively.
I'm still a paramedic, but I don't practice as a paramedic. Haven't.
You're licensed as a paramedic.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep. So the company that I founded actually focuses. It's a learning management system, but also content that provides.
And what is a learning management system?
Sure. So in the fire and EMS world, you have to have the ability to track records, certifications, etc., because the states and or the federal government regulates what you have to have in training. So the learning management system is a tool they can use when they're on shift or they're at home or whatever to manage their certifications and track their records that they have to do for compliance and auditing. But we also built content that allows them to get the continuing education hours they need to stay proficient at whatever those particular topics are. If it's trauma or pediatrics or obstetrics, whatever it may be. We were the first company in the United States to actually get accredited in the United States and 33 other countries to do virtual instructor-led education for fire and EMS. So
why is there such a massive gap in that market?
I think the gap existed because even though EMS and the fire service, there's really fire and EMS are really two separate industries, even though they cross each other to some extent. The gap existed only because a lot of people would do this in their own little regions or their own little local areas, and it wasn't a huge revenue generator. Unfortunately, it's a business, and you have to be able to justify the cost and all that stuff. And online education started in about 1997 in the fire and EMS world, but it really hasn't changed in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So when we kind of threw the wrench into it in 2014, we just kind of changed it up, and it's been interesting to see the industry as a whole, not just things that we're doing, but other folks in the space are really trying to make, from augmented reality or virtual reality, because if you think about the types of calls these firefighters and paramedics are going on, they need, you can't go and practice some of these skills on real people. So, they'd
be like, "What are you doing, dude? This is weird."
Yeah. So, and you can't always get into. A lot of people don't know this, but paramedics and firefighters have the ability sometimes to do cadaver labs. So they'll go to a hospital or university and they'll practice skills on cadavers that have been donated to science for these types of things.
Yeah.
But
so now you're looking at taking the VR into that platform.
Yes, we're looking at doing some augmented or virtual reality to be able to do some of these high acuity skills that happen very infrequently, to train more frequently in a virtual space, because you can't obviously get a cadaver every time that you want to practice a skill. So
now, what was it that made you go, like the light bulb came on and this needs to be I want to go off and do this entrepreneur thing over here? Because you were an active EMT at the time?
No, I was over customer relations for 27 states.
Yeah. And
it was for all the air medical helicopters and airplanes.
Okay, gotcha.
So my job was really to manage the business side, if you will, of that stuff. So because I still had a paramedic license and I kept all my certifications, kind of how I started my career. So I, just like anyone in this industry, you work 2 or 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. So I was still doing writing on the side and all these things, but I got 2 years into that. And I'm like, crap, I haven't done any of my continuing education hours that I need.
Yeah. So, and how did they do it before? Like, how would people normally do it without your platform? You
would do it. There was a couple other, companies that do it online, but you would just go and search for conferences, or you'd find a hospital that was offering some class on whatever it may be, or the fire EMS agencies have educators that could do some of the education for their folks. So that has historically how it's always worked. But because of everything happening in the world, think about Las Vegas, unfortunately, is a great example. Fire and EMS have to train more on those types of scenarios versus things that you just have to do because the state and or federal regulatory bodies say you must do. And so what we were able to do is come in and say, hey, we'll take all that off your hands. We'll do that for you. They'll let you focus your efforts with the folks that you already have, those educators. They can take that time and focus it on those more bigger issues or more important educational things, and we'll do all the stuff that you won't have to worry about. So I was 2 or 3 months away from my recertification, and I had none of my hours done. And I told my boss at the time, I said, there has to be an easier way of doing this. And I spent about 2 months reading regulations, looked at all 50 states' regulations, which was a very tiresome process. Lots of phone calls.
So a lot of books.
A lot of books.
Man.
And I found this stipulation that said if you could do it this way, we will accredit your organization. And I'm like, why hasn't anyone done this yet?
Right.
So we started working on it, and I reached out to the accrediting body, and they started reviewing, and they'd come back to us and say, well, you need to tweak this or do whatever. And they approved it in August of 2014. Wow. And we had already had a go live date, so I'm like, I really hope this accreditation thing works.
Yeah. When was the go live date from then?
September 1st.
Yeah.
So, and that had been set back in March.
Oh, yeah.
So when I started looking at regulations, I'm like, I didn't think it was going to be that much. But,
yeah.
But it was.
Wow.
So started that in September with no employees, really. It was contractors that were helping do all this stuff. And I still had a full-time job. So on top of that, trying to do this.
Yeah.
It just kind of took off. And
what's happened from 14 to 17?
So from a student-based perspective, we started with 12 students. We had no, fire or EMS departments that were our customers or city or county government. It was pretty much if you found this on the web.
Yeah, straight to the consumer or whatever.
Exactly, yep. And interestingly about that, I absolutely knew nothing about Google Ads or organic search. That was totally clueless. And, we just kind of started getting up and running, and we got into January. And knowing how certification cycles happen, it just got really busy. And got through that year. We added 2 contractors to teach. We ended up having 25 educators that live across the country by the end of 2015.
Virtual
educators. Yep.
Is this all housed on the Medic CE website? Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Was the name Medic CE?
It was not.
Back then?
No, it was not. It was actually called Code 3 CME.
Oh, okay.
And everyone always asks me, where in the hell did you come up with that name? Well, when you see a fire truck or ambulance going with lights and siren, that's Code 3. That's it's an emergent response. So that's how I came up with the name, because people could relate to it. So in 2015, August of 2015, I was actually driving to a little town in Wyoming for my full-time job for a meeting in a hospital. And I got a call from this company in Utah. And just from there, that was August. So I became the vice president of continuing education for the parent company in October of 2015.
Who was the parent company?
Career Step.
Okay.
And Career Step traditionally has always done medical coding and billing. That's been predominantly their business. And then they started focusing on other healthcare type of education things. I started with them in October. They acquired the majority of my business in January of 2016. And I was already in discussion with another company they were either going to acquire me or I was going to acquire them, which was Medic CE. And then we acquired them in September of 2016, and that added another 300 hours of content that we didn't have before.
Wow.
And a more robust learning management system. And then July of 2017, so this year, Code 3 and Medic CE merged July 1st. So we now have about 300 fire and or EMS departments. The United States military uses us to do their folks that are in a deployed location who need to do a refresher. Yep. They'll do it through us because they can do it from a tablet or whatever. The FBI, the National Park Service. So it's been it's a good problem to have, but growth has been quick.
Yeah.
So we have a big announcement coming out.
How did you get your first funding for when you first started? Did you just bootstrap in a sales type manner, or did you have someone invest into the company early on?
Yeah. So I put my business plan together. Went to all the financial stuff. Matter of fact, the company that built my website said, hey, there's some of these folks, we really believe in what you're doing. It actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah. There's these guys up in Boulder that you could potentially talk to, and I decided not to. So on a fluke, I called my brother.
Don't mess with Boulder.
Yeah. I called my brother, and I said, hey, can I borrow this money? And, of course, I thought he was going to hang the phone up on me. And he's like, send me your business plan. And 2 weeks later, he called me back and said, where do you want me to transfer the money? Yeah. So I started with very little capital and quickly learned that I was going to need more. Yeah. But I self-funded the rest. So nice. It was quite an interesting.
What are you guys today? It's October, right? October 2017. What are you guys valued at 3 years later?
Yeah. So about $10 million, just with my part of the business. So like I said, it's been. I can be honest. I started with $40,000 in capital, and luckily was able to pay my brother back quickly. Yeah, that over my head. But it's pretty much been, when we acquired Medic CE and we merged, we actually have a capital investment group here in Denver that has been very helpful. But it's a subscription based type of program that allows us to obviously have that recurring revenue because these people have to do this stuff all the time. And now we're just kind of tweaking, if you will, or being more direct on the type of content we build so that way we can focus on what's happening today in the industry because obviously they don't want to take content that was 6 or 7 years ago. They want to know and take education about what affects them today. And this partnership that we're doing will definitely allow us, to be able to have access to subject matter experts in the industry from around the world that we would absolutely not have the ability to touch, without that partnership. So
yeah, who are some of the key folks that helped you, in this business venture? And how did you get connected up with them?
So are you talking more about in the industry specifically, or just? I
would say just in general. Who are some people that have really been, this is Mile High Mentors. Who's been some mentors to you in that time?
I talked about my brother, who was very nice.
Older brother?
Older brher. He actually is an aerospace engineer, works for NASA.
Wow.
So when I was a firefighter.
Is he here in Colorado?
No, he's in Titusville, Florida, which is down by Cape Canaveral.
Gotcha.
So when I was a firefighter, he actually was the payload director for the space shuttle. Wow. So it was kind of cool to get to, he's 9 years older than me. So he has always been, I always say, the voice of reason, the one who kind of keeps me grounded. My aunt, who I talked about earlier, who kind of got me interested in this stuff, she's been always very supportive. From the business perspective, though, I've really kind of leaned on people that I've met throughout my career, even though they were specifically in fire and EMS administration, managing a fire department. Right. But when I was a firefighter paramedic, there's this one lady who comes to mind. She was my lieutenant. She's now the fire chief at this department I worked at in Florida. And she would always say these little things on shift, choose your battles or whatever it may be, these little cliche things she would say. But she always kind of set a foundation of take out the emotion and make a strong factual decision about something. And really the business part of it's been something I've learned more over the last 3 years when we start talking to capital investment groups, and that has been a total different area that was way above my head.
Do you have someone kind of guiding you through that?
Yeah, so our CEO now of the parent company, he's been pretty awesome at explaining what all that stuff means. Our COO, and they both come from financial backgrounds.
Yeah.
Or I think our CEO actually was a lawyer at one time in the finance space.
Yeah. So
they've been very instrumental in helping me understand that part of the world that is totally confusing. Yeah. But, I think another part was my military experience kind of helped me stay grounded. A lot of people say, how in the heck did you, do all this stuff from 17 to 37? And I pretty much say, look, I always had a goal, and I never made a goal that was, at least what I thought was not reachable. Mm-hmm. And I would always work, let's call them sections to get to the main goal. But if I didn't make a particular benchmark, I wouldn't necessarily get discouraged. I'd realign myself and keep moving on to whatever that next benchmark was. So for me, everything I've done in my career, as most people try to do, it's always been a positive. I've always had a pretty good stepping stone, and I started doing this at 34.
Yeah,
in the whole business entrepreneurship stuff, and it definitely has been a wild ride.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, you're so young. What's the end game here for you? What's the big picture?
Good question. I've been asked that question a lot lately. I don't know, to be honest with you. We're going to continue growing the business. We have a pretty good...
Are you going to step away from the business at some point?
I think so, at some point. Not ready to do that yet. I always joke with people and say, well, at 42 I'm going to retire. And they're like, what the hell are you going to do?
Yeah.
You like to work too much. So who knows? I honestly don't know. And it's interesting because I don't really consider what I do a job. Mm-hmm. I love doing it because since I'm not out in the field anymore delivering the care or whatever I would do as a firefighter, when I worked as a firefighter paramedic or a flight paramedic, if you really the way I think about it, and we always talk to our employees about, is we're touching every single patient that those paramedics or those firefighters are responding to. And if you really look at our reach, we have a pretty good footprint across the country and even into South America, Germany, Australia now. So every time I see a fire truck or an ambulance going somewhere, I'm like, hey, especially if it's in a city or, that we have that's a customer of ours.
Yeah. Our platform could have...
Our platform and our education could have, yep.
That's incredible.
Absolutely. So that's really what keeps me going because I can still give back. And obviously, we talked earlier, being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a year and a half ago really would have put a kibosh anyway on me being able to be in the field working as a firefighter paramedic. So this still allows me that opportunity to do something I love, but deliver it differently than what I would be able to do 10 years ago.
Right.
So
man,
it's been fun.
What advice would you give to somebody who has a job right now? Mm-hmm. They're probably listening to this and they have a really good idea, kind of like they see a gap in the market. What are maybe the first 2 or 3 or 4 starting places that you would give them?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, one of the things I learned is you really have to take out the emotion about, maybe it's your gap. Maybe it's just really affecting you and not everybody. So you have to do research.
Don't be overly romantic.
Correct. Yes.
Your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Take that bias out as best you can, and really write a business plan to see, one, if it's even going to be something that's viable. And a matter of fact, when I did mine, I gave it to 10 people. 5 of them worked in fire and EMS. 5 of them did not. And I said, look at this and see if it makes sense. And what really validated mine was when 100% of them came back and said, yes, you are on to something. This really makes a lot of sense. People who didn't even know this particular space.
So feedback.
Feedback's important. So, take out the emotion. Don't, make a decision to do a business on emotion, because I know I've seen a lot of people do that, even not in the public safety realm, but just people I know personally that have started businesses.
Right.
You just wonder what the heck's going to happen because you don't see any forward thinking with what they're trying to do. Validation being the second one. And the third one is once you commit yourself, there is no question there are going to be days that you just want to quit. You're like, what the hell did I get myself into?
Right. And
that actually happened. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I thought about that when I first started. But you just got to stay the course.
Do you still get that today?
I don't get that today. As things become more complex, you start just scratching your head. Why does this have to be so difficult? More than it used to be. But, it's part of growth. So it's really just, when you commit yourself, you stick to it. And just you have to be open-minded, and you have to be able to adjust, because what you put on a business plan, when you start getting a month to 2 years, whatever down the road, you've got to be able to adjust, because that business plan, even though you wrote it, it's relevant to the time you wrote it. Things change so much. And there's things that you just don't know. And that was a huge learning experience for me, because I got into this. I'm like, how hard could this stuff be, right? I am a subject matter expert in this particular industry for what I'm doing, but I quickly found out that I am not a technology expert in any way, shape, or form, or a marketing person. So
I disagree with that. I think you do have a PR mind. Like, there's no way you would have expanded the way you did without that. Yeah. Your marketing is more of your personality and your brand. Well, that's what I think's probably gotten you so far.
There's probably some truth to that. I guess what I probably should have said is when I got to a point where I didn't know what the hell to do, I at least was smart enough to reach out to people who I thought could help, and that was really good. And I think that's probably one of the last things is don't be afraid to ask for help. If you don't ask, then you don't know what they're going to tell you. What the worst they're going to say is no.
Right.
And most people, especially if they see someone who's really trying to do something and you're committed to it and you're executing it or you're trying, they're not going to tell you no. I mean, I wouldn't go ask your competitor, but everybody, business is business, no matter what industry you're in. And for the most part, the basics are all the same. Then you just have to figure out how to tweak it for your particular, industry. So, and don't get in a rut. In other words, don't get I don't know what I'm looking for. I guess lazy with a thought process that, okay, I'm done. You always have to be forward thinking, and that's one thing I tell my employees all the time, because they'll get excited. Oh, we're off to the. One of them said yesterday with this announcement we have coming out on Monday. We're off to the races or something. And I said, hey, this is just the beginning. I said, think about 3 years ago. On Monday, we're a startup again, because we are expanding in places that we have never, ever had that opportunity to do. So we can look at historical data all the time. We kind of know some trends from content and those types of things.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is what's getting ready to happen on Monday. We can always guesstimate, but you've got to be open-minded and be able to execute and be able to change based off facts, not emotion, because emotions will get you in big trouble.
Yeah.
Lessons learned from me.
Yeah.
So it's cost me a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Emotional decisions are bad.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool, man. Those are really, really good tips for any entrepreneur.
Right.
Now we were talking back and forth on Facebook. You said you're up early and you're doing motivational, like listening to some motivational stuff. What content do you consume to kind of keep yourself going? Who are some of your thought leaders that you follow pretty closely?
You're going to ask me that. I was listening to it actually on the way down here.
Okay.
I'm always been an early riser.
Yeah.
But all my friends and family would say I go to bed with the chickens. Even when I was in my 20s, I'm like, my friends would call me at 10 o'clock. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm asleep, man.
Yeah.
But every single day, this has been my entire life. Well, my adult life. People ask me where I kind of picked this up. I have no idea, but I would always find some sort of thought leadership in I'm trying to think way back when. I don't think YouTube was around, but whatever it was, I would find some sort of clip, either it be an audio clip or a video clip. And I think for me, I always had to have something that was going to drive me. So as an example, you always are going to have people that say, you can't do this. And I'm always in the mindset, well, screw you, I'm going to show you I can. Right. So, criticism's good, but criticism can also beat you down after it happens so much. So, today, every morning I wake up, you probably see some of my posts on Facebook, but I will listen to different videos, 3 or 4 minute clips, when I'm driving or going to the airport or whatever. And from thought leaders.
What kind of videos? Just motivational or like some person in particular?
There's not a particular person. Mostly they're focused on, just drive, staying focused, and those types of things. There's not really one thought leader. It's just whatever I'm in the mood for.
Who do you glom onto? There's got to be a couple.
I don't remember his name. There is actually 1 or 2, but
Tony Robbins or people like that, or are you more Grant Cardone or Gary Vaynerchuk? Or,
they're like Tony, but it's not Tony. I don't.
In your industry, do you focus on people who have been in your industry?
Yep.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
In my industry, more obviously they're usually the older generation folks that I listen to or kind of listen to their podcast and those types of things, but. A lot of times you can just find things that are relevant across no matter what industry you're in, and I will just listen to those. And really, when I'm having, I guess the last thing is whenever I'm starting to what the heck am I doing here, I'll just listen to things that really lift me up and say, this is why you're doing this, and helps me refocus. As corny as that may sound, but it works for me. So but
if it works,
works,
gets you smoked up, gets you going, and fired up and everything, man.
Yep.
So what in your in what you're doing now, and you're scaling and growing, what kind of resources are you looking for? Anyone for hire in particular that you can shout out for, or are you doing any sort of mentorship stuff? Any internships that people can keep an eye out for? So
we are gonna be hiring some folks. We're gonna hire more educators, probably a product manager. Product marketing manager, some folks who can help us really analyze the industry more and be more strategic with content or programs that we build. And I think that's probably about it for 2018. See what happens and what else we may need. But things that we got, I've been a one-man band in regards to doing product management, sales, just like any startup. And now it's all right, we can start looking at hiring people to help us get these things done. So from scholarships or internships, we are working on some things. We'll release next year at some point that we will have available the ability to do internships or fellowships or people that are in the industry that and it's funny because I always say not me, but other people who a department may want to have someone come and speak, guest speaker, motivational, whatever. So we're working on those types of things because in this industry, it's about relationships. Yeah. And relationship selling, I don't even know if that's a real word in sales, but that's what I call it.
Relationship selling?
Yeah. So,
I think so.
It's really, really important in this industry.
Right.
You're just not going to call up someone and sell them something. You really got to build a relationship. So
B2B is more human than
absolutely
anything, right?
Emails don't work.
Emails don't work.
They do not work.
That's why you're on and you're using LinkedIn, you're using Facebook and all that stuff. And where can people find you if they want to contact you?
Sure.
Something you said today resonated well with them.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Judson Smith, or go to MedXCE's website and there's About Us tab. My bio's there with my email address. It's probably the best way to find me. And if I don't respond to your email, it's not because I don't want to talk to you. It's because I can't keep up with all the emails.
Right.
So
keep emailing.
Text me.
Follow up.
Email me. Whatever. Tag me. I promise I'll get back to you.
I'll give you Judson's phone number directly, and you can cold call him.
That's where you go. 'Cause that happens a lot.
Any last word? Are you a millennial? Wait, how old are you now?
I'm 37.
37.
Just over.
You're just over.
Yeah.
You're just over. Any other last? Not even the millennial generation, but any last thoughts or feedback or words for folks that are looking to either enter the space that you've been in or start their entrepreneurship journey?
Yep. So I see this more obviously with millennials, and it's not digging on millennials at all, because obviously I used to be in my 20s at some point, and I was that person. You just have to be patient. You cannot expect that you're going to start a job at 21 and by 23 you're going to be the CEO. You know, when I was 21 years old as a firefighter paramedic, I'm like, oh, I want to be, you know, whatever it was, a lieutenant or whatever the next level was up the ranks. You just got to be patient and learn, be open-minded, and be consistent. And when you're wrong, admit you're wrong, admit your failures, and don't let it get you down. I always took my failures as a learning experience. And I think one of the things people say a lot about me is, you're so open about talking about what you failed at. Yeah, because one, I want other people to know it's okay to talk about what you failed at, because no one's good at everything. And number two, it allows me, at least in my mind, to identify more verbally and more consciously what my failures are or where my weaknesses are, so I can find people and align myself with those folks who are strong in those areas. Part of this is the military mentality. You know, you can only do so much by yourself, but really to execute, in my mind, any type of business, it's a collaborative team effort, and it's not Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I do see this a lot with younger people, as they think, well, it's 5 o'clock and going home. And that's okay if that's what you want, but don't expect that you're going to make it very far.
This is younger people within your organization?
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, on Fridays at 3 o'clock, they're gone. You're like, where'd the marketing department go?
Yeah.
So I just think you have to be open-minded, and, you know, you just got to put your time in. I know it's so cliche. I heard that so much when I was in my 20s. Yeah. And it drove me absolutely crazy, but it's unfortunately, it's just part of business.
Yeah,
so,
patience.
Patience
is the biggest thing.
And when you get in your late 20s, you realize what you really didn't know in your younger 20s. And when you get in your late 30s, you're like, damn, I didn't know a lot more. So yeah, it's got to be patient. So.
Cool, man. Well, I think that's perfect, Judson. I really appreciate it, man. So happy to have you down here in the studio. Finally, thanks for giving us your great story. That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. That was Mile High Mentors for today. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram, on SoundCloud, on Spreaker, and on iTunes, coming up here soon. Thanks, guys. Love you all. Take care.